Nothing good ever happens after 10 p.m. in Chelsea, unless you count raccoons mating or marriages dissolving. I was under the hood of my pickup truck, grease-coating my knuckles like war paint, when I heard my wife Janet laughing through the kitchen window. The sound cut through the October night air like a rusty blade. "Oh, Ken, you're terrible," she giggled into her phone. "I can't wait to see those magic hands of yours again." I froze, wrench suspended in midair. 23 years of marriage, and I'd never heard her laugh like that. Not for me, anyway. Not in the last decade. "The usual place tomorrow, room 237? Another giggle. "I'll tell John I'm having lunch with the girls from the bank." The wrench slipped from my fingers and clanged against the engine block. 23 years of fixing everything that broke in our house, and now I couldn't fix the one thing that mattered most. My name is John Mitchell. I'm a draftsman at Henderson Construction, the kind of guy who notices when measurements don't add up. Right now, the numbers in my marriage weren't balancing either. I wiped my hands on an old rag and walked toward the house, boots crunching on fallen leaves. Through the window, I could see Janet pacing the kitchen, twirling a strand of her newly highlighted hair around her finger. She'd been getting a lot of highlights lately, and new clothes, and working late at the regional bank where she was assistant manager. The screen door creaked as I entered. Janet spun around, phone pressed against her chest. "John, you scared me." Her smile looked painted on. "I was just talking to my sister about the church fundraiser. Your sister lives in Phoenix. It's past midnight there." "Oh, you know how she is. Night owl." Janet's laugh sounded forced now, mechanical. "I'm heading to bed. Don't track grease through the house." She brushed past me, and I caught a whiff of perfume I didn't recognize. Expensive perfume. The kind assistant bank managers don't usually wear to work. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I stood in the kitchen, listening to her footsteps on the stairs, and felt something shift inside me, like a gear clicking into place. The basement workshop called to me, full of tools and blueprints and things that made sense, things that could be measured and fixed and understood. But first, I had some measuring of my own to do. The next morning brought gray skies and the kind of drizzle that makes everything look tired. I sat at the kitchen table, nursing black coffee and watching Janet flutter around like a nervous butterfly. She'd changed outfits 3 times, finally settling on a dress that showed more leg than usual. "Big day at the bank?" I asked. "Just the usual. Loan applications, customer meetings." She grabbed her purse, avoiding my eyes. "I'll be home late, meeting the girls for drinks after work." "Which girls?" "You know, Michelle, Lisa, that crowd." Janet's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her keys. "Don't wait up." I nodded, sipping my coffee. "Drive safe." After her car disappeared down Maple Street, I called in sick to Henderson Construction. First time in 3 years. Then I settled into my recliner with Janet's laptop, the one she thought was password protected. She'd used our anniversary date. How romantic. Her email history read like a romance novel written by someone with no imagination. Ken Williams from the bank's loan department had been sending her messages for months, detailed messages about hotel rooms and afternoon meetings and how her husband was too boring to appreciate a woman like you. I printed everything. 3 years of blueprints had taught me to document thoroughly. My phone buzzed. A text from our daughter Beth, away at college. "Dad, Mom's credit card got declined at the grocery store. She asked me to ask you about it." I stared at the message, then at the hotel receipts scattered across the coffee table, the Riverbend Resort. 50 miles away. Charged to our joint account every Tuesday for the past 2 months. Tuesdays. Janet's late meetings at the bank. I grabbed my truck keys and headed for the door. Time for some field research. The Riverbend Resort squatted beside Highway 34 like a guilty secret. Faded pink stucco, neon sign missing half its letters, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. Perfect for a respectable bank assistant manager having an affair with a loan officer. I parked behind a rusted dumpster and waited. The October wind rattled my truck windows, and I thought about all the Tuesday evenings Janet had come home smelling like soap and making excuses about traffic delays. At 1:47 p.m., a silver BMW pulled into the lot. Ken Williams stepped out, straightening his tie like he was heading into a board meeting instead of a sleazy motel room. He was younger than me by maybe 10 years, with the kind of artificial confidence that comes from expensive suits and commission checks. 15 minutes later, Janet's Honda Civic joined the BMW. She practically skipped to the motel office, keys jingling in her hand. The desk clerk handed her a room key without looking up from his magazine. Room 237. just like she'd said on the phone. I sat there for 2 hours, watching other cars come and go, thinking about the man I used to be, the guy who trusted his wife, who believed in marriage vows and shared dreams. That guy felt like a stranger now. When they finally emerged, Janet's hair was messed up and Ken's shirt was wrinkled. They kissed beside his BMW, and Janet laughed that same musical laugh I'd heard through the kitchen window. I waited until they drove away, then walked over to Ken's car. The BMW gleamed in the afternoon sun, all chrome and arrogance. I pulled out my house key and dragged it along the driver's side door, carving a nice long scratch from headlight to taillight. Then I tucked a note under his windshield wiper. "Enjoy the ride, lover boy. Next time, bring protection for your tires." My phone buzzed as I walked back to my truck. A text from an unknown number. "We know you were here. Watch yourself." I smiled for the first time in weeks. Game on. The bank's annual family picnic should have come with a warning label. Caution, contains adultery and awkward potato salad. I showed up in my best jeans and a clean flannel shirt, looking like exactly what I was, a blue-collar husband who didn't belong in this world of pressed khakis and golf stories. Janet stood near the dessert table with Ken, laughing at something he'd whispered in her ear. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. Her hand rested on his arm, and she gazed up at him like he'd just invented fire. "John." Michelle from accounting waved me over. "How's the construction business?" "Can't complain. People always need something built or fixed." I grabbed a beer from the cooler, scanning the crowd. "Speaking of fixing things, anyone know a good mechanic? Someone keyed Ken's BMW in the bank parking lot yesterday." Michelle's eyes went wide. "Really? Who would do such a thing?" "Hard to say. Could be anyone with a grudge." I took a long sip of beer. Maybe someone who doesn't appreciate loan officers who work too much overtime. Across the pavilion, Ken's head snapped up. Our eyes met, and I raised my beer in a mock toast. The afternoon dragged on like a root canal performed by a drunk dentist. I made small talk with people who pitied me, ate dry hamburgers, and watched my wife flirt with her lover in front of half the town. When the bank president called for attention to give his annual speech about teamwork and integrity, I nearly choked on my potato chips. "Before Tom speaks," I said, standing up and clearing my throat, "I'd like to propose a toast." The crowd shifted their attention to me, conversations fading out. Janet's face lost its color. "To honesty," I said, raising my beer high. "May it one day find this crowd." Then, nervous laughter from a few people who thought I was making a joke. Janet excused herself and hurried toward the restrooms, Ken trailing behind her like a trained puppy. I finished my beer and headed for the parking lot. Time to go home and plan my next move. But first, I had a stop to make at the gym. Billy's Fitness occupied a converted warehouse on the wrong side of downtown, all concrete floors and iron weights, and the kind of honest sweat that comes from real work. Billy Kowalski had owned the place for 15 years, ever since he retired from the fire department with a bad back and a worse attitude toward authority. "You look like someone ran over your dog," Billy said, spotting me on the bench press. "What's eating you?" I told him everything. The phone calls, the hotel receipts, the family picnic humiliation. Billy listened without judgment, occasionally grunting his disapproval. "So what's the plan?" he asked when I finished. "Don't have one yet." "Well, you better figure it out fast. That BMW's parked outside?" I sat up, wiping sweat from my forehead. Through the gym's front window, I could see Ken's silver car gleaming under the streetlight. The scratch I'd left was barely visible, probably buffed out by some expensive body shop. "He's got stones, I'll give him that," Billy muttered. "Coming to your gym." "My gym?" "You've been lifting here longer than anyone except me. This is your territory." Ken walked through the front door like he owned the place, designer workout clothes and a gym bag that probably cost more than my truck payment. He nodded at Billy and headed for the treadmills, ignoring me completely. I finished my set and walked over to the water fountain, which happened to be right next to Ken's treadmill. He was jogging at a leisurely pace, probably warming up for whatever routine rich boys do to stay in shape. "Nice evening for a run," I said. Ken glanced over, sweat already beading on his forehead. "Yeah, good to get some exercise after a long day at work." "I bet. All that overtime must be exhausting." His pace faltered slightly. "Excuse me?" "Nothing, just making conversation." I filled my water bottle, taking my time. "By the way, sorry to hear about your car getting scratched. A lot of vandalism going around lately." Ken stopped the treadmill and stepped off, facing me directly. "Look, I don't know what you think you know." "I don't think anything. I know plenty." I capped my water bottle. "Question is, what are you going to do about it?" Are you threatening me? Just having a friendly chat between neighbors. But if you want advice, I'd suggest finding a new hobby. This one's going to get expensive. I walked away before he could respond, but I could feel his eyes boring into my back. Billy was waiting by the free weights, shaking his head. That was subtle as a brick through a window. Sometimes subtle doesn't work. What's next? I looked back at Ken, who was packing up his gym bag with shaking hands. Now I get creative. I'd always been the good guy, the reliable husband who fixed leaky faucets and remembered anniversaries and never complained when Janet spent too much on shoes. But good guys finish last, and I was tired of losing. Time to be the villain. Monday morning, I called the bank and reported our credit cards stolen. Someone's been making unauthorized charges, I told the customer service representative. Hotels, restaurants, places my wife and I never go. By noon, Janet's cards were frozen. She called me from the grocery store, voice shaking with embarrassment. John, my card won't work. There's a line of people behind me, and I can't pay for groceries. That's strange. Maybe there's a problem with the account. Can you call the bank? I'm in the middle of a project deadline. Can't it wait until tonight? Silence. Then, fine, I'll figure it out myself. She hung up, and I smiled. Let her figure it out. Let her explain to the checkout clerk and the other customers why the assistant bank manager can't pay for a cart full of groceries. That evening, I sat at my computer and opened a new social media account. Anonymous, untraceable, the kind of profile that could share interesting information without consequences. The Chelsey Community Forum was always hungry for gossip, and I had plenty to feed them. Interesting fact, I typed. The Riverbend Resort on Highway 34 offers special Tuesday rates for local bank employees. Apparently it's popular with the loan department. Check your company's code of conduct policies. I hit post and leaned back in my chair. Within an hour, the comment had dozens of likes and replies. Small towns love their scandals, especially when they involve people who think they're better than everyone else. Wednesday brought rain and a phone call from Janet's supervisor. She was being asked to attend a meeting with Human Resources about workplace conduct concerns. Janet blamed me, of course. Someone's spreading rumors about me at the bank. Was it you? Why would I spread rumors about my own wife? Because you're jealous and bitter and you can't stand that I have a career. I looked up from my newspaper. Janet stood in the kitchen doorway, still in her work clothes, mascara smudged from crying. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. If you're having problems at work, maybe you should examine your own behavior. My behavior? I work 60 hours a week trying to build something for our family. Is that what you call it? She stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked upstairs. I heard the bedroom door slam, followed by muffled phone conversation. Probably calling Ken to complain about her terrible husband who didn't understand her needs. Thursday, I decided to pay Ken a visit. I'd done my research. Ken Williams lived in Riverside Gardens, a new apartment complex that catered to young professionals with more money than sense. His unit was on the 3rd floor, corner apartment with a view of the parking lot and a balcony barely big enough for a chair. Getting inside was easier than I'd expected. The maintenance crew was working on the building's heating system, and I simply walked in, wearing my work clothes and carrying a toolbox. Nobody questions a guy who looks like he belongs. Ken's spare key was under a fake rock by his door. Original. His apartment looked like a furniture store showroom. All black leather and chrome, abstract art on the walls, nothing personal or warm. The refrigerator was full of energy drinks and takeout containers. The bathroom counter was covered with expensive cologne and hair products. I got to work. First, I filled every pair of shoes in his closet with sardines. Then, I poured glitter into the air conditioning vents, the kind of craft glitter that never comes out, no matter how much you vacuum. I loosened the shower head so it would spray in random directions. I reset all his clocks to different times. I programmed his coffee maker to brew at 3 a.m. For the finishing touch, I left notes. Lots of notes. Stuck to his bathroom mirror. Homewrecker lives here. Taped to his refrigerator. Ask me about my affair with married women. Hidden in his sock drawer. Karma is coming. Then I let myself out and drove to the gym, where Billy was waiting with a tow truck. You sure about this? Billy asked as we hooked up Ken's BMW. Absolutely. He parked in a no-parking zone. We're just being good citizens. We towed the BMW to Billy's cousin's junkyard, where it would sit until Ken paid the storage fees, which would be difficult since we'd also removed all 4 tires and left the car up on blocks. I was home by dinner time, humming while I heated up leftover pizza. Janet came downstairs looking haggard, her phone pressed to her ear. I don't know what happened, she was saying. He's not answering his phone. She hung up and glared at me. Ken's missing. His car is gone, and he didn't show up for work today. That's terrible. Maybe he went out of town. Without telling anyone? That's not like him. I shrugged. People do strange things when they're under stress. Maybe he's having personal problems. Janet's phone buzzed. She read the message, and her face went white. What is it? I asked. Nothing, just work stuff. But I could see the fear in her eyes. The message was probably from Ken, describing the chaos I'd left in his apartment. Or maybe it was from someone else entirely. Someone who'd been watching and waiting for the right moment to make their move. Either way, the game was just getting started. Friday morning brought unexpected visitors. I was drinking coffee and reading the newspaper when our daughter Beth walked through the front door, followed by her younger sister Britt. Both girls looked serious, the kind of serious that comes from knowing family secrets adults think they're hiding. Dad, we need to talk, Beth said. At 19, Beth had inherited my skeptical nature and Janet's stubborn streak. Britt, 17 and sharper than both of us, carried her laptop like a weapon. Mom's been acting weird, Britt announced, settling onto the couch. Weirder than usual, I mean. Define weird. New clothes, new perfume, working late every night, Beth ticked off on her fingers. Plus, she's been texting someone constantly, someone named Ken. I set down my coffee cup. How do you know about Ken? Because we're not blind, Dad. Britt opened her laptop. Also because Mom forgot to log out of her cloud account on the family computer. Want to see her photo gallery? The pictures made my stomach turn. Janet and Ken at restaurants I'd never been to, holding hands across candlelit tables. Janet and Ken at some beach resort, her wearing a bikini I'd never seen. Janet and Ken in what was obviously a hotel room, both of them laughing at something off camera. There are about 50 more, Britt said quietly, going back months. Beth sat down beside me. Dad, are you and Mom getting divorced? The question hung in the air like smoke. I looked at my daughters, smart, tough, loyal girls who deserved better than this mess, and felt something harden inside my chest. I don't know yet, but whatever happens, you two are my priority. What are you going to do? Britt asked. Handle it. That afternoon, I drove to the bank and asked to speak with Janet privately. She met me in the parking lot, looking nervous and guilty. The girls know, I said without preamble. Janet's face crumpled. Know what? About Ken. About the hotels. About everything. John, I can explain. No need. I've seen the pictures. Very artistic. It's not what you think. I laughed, and the sound surprised both of us. It's exactly what I think. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Janet straightened her shoulders, and I saw a flash of the woman I'd married, the one who never backed down from a fight. I want a divorce. I want the house and half your retirement and primary custody of the girls. Interesting negotiation strategy. What do I get? Your dignity. If you don't fight me on this, I won't tell everyone how you've been stalking me and Ken. Stalking, is that what we're calling it? You keyed his car. You had it towed. You broke into his apartment. I smiled. Prove it. Janet's confidence wavered. I know it was you. Knowing and proving are different things. But since we're making accusations, let's talk about bank policy regarding employee relationships, particularly relationships that involve fraudulent expense reports and misuse of company resources. You wouldn't. Try me. Janet's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and frowned. Ken wants to meet tonight. He says he has a plan. Good for Ken. Where? Why do you care? Just curious about my replacement's strategic thinking. Janet hesitated, then said, The Riverside Bar. 8 o'clock. Perfect. I'll be sure to avoid the area. But of course, I had no intention of avoiding anything. The Riverside Bar was about to become very interesting. I spent the rest of the afternoon making preparations, phone calls to certain people, arrangements for certain favors, the kind of groundwork that separates amateurs from professionals. By 7:30, everything was in place. The Riverside Bar occupied the ground floor of an old hotel downtown, all dark wood and dim lighting, and the kind of atmosphere that encouraged bad decisions. I arrived early and claimed a corner booth with a clear view of the entrance. Janet and Ken arrived separately, probably trying to maintain the illusion of discretion. They met at the bar, ordered drinks, and found a table near the back. I couldn't hear their conversation, but their body language told the story. Ken was agitated, gesturing with his hands. Janet kept looking around nervously. At 8:15, Michelle from the bank walked in. She spotted Janet and Ken immediately, her eyebrows rising in surprise. By 8:30, 2 more bank employees had arrived. Tom from loans, and Susan from customer service. Word was spreading. Ken noticed the audience first. He said something to Janet, who turned around and saw their co-workers watching. Her face went red, then pale. At 8:45, the final guest arrived. Janet's mother, Martha, walked through the front door like an avenging angel in a floral print dress. I'd called her that afternoon with an anonymous tip about her daughter's whereabouts. Martha marched straight to Janet's table, her voice carrying across the entire bar. "Janet Louise, what in heaven's name do you think you're doing?" The confrontation was spectacular. Martha, a devout Methodist who'd raised Janet to believe in marriage vows and moral behavior, had plenty to say about adultery and public embarrassment. Janet tried to explain, Ken tried to defend, and the entire bar watched like it was dinner theater. I finished my beer and left through the back door, grinning all the way to my truck. Phase 1 was complete. Time for the finale. The annual Chelsey Harvest Festival should have been about pumpkins and apple cider and families enjoying the last warm weekend before winter. Instead, it became the stage for the final act of my marriage. I'd volunteered to help set up the sound system, a decision that would prove crucial later. The festival committee was grateful for free labor, especially from someone who actually knew how to work the equipment. They didn't question why I insisted on keeping the master microphone. Janet arrived with Ken around noon, both of them trying to look casual despite the whispered conversations that followed them through the crowd. Word of their bar confrontation had spread through town faster than gossip usually traveled, which in Chelsey was saying something. I watched them from the equipment tent, adjusting levels and testing connections. They bought funnel cakes and wandered through the craft booths, playing the part of a happy couple. But I could see the strain around Janet's eyes, the way Ken kept checking his phone. At 2:00, I made my move. Testing. Testing. My voice boomed across the festival grounds through a dozen speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for a moment." The crowd turned toward the sound system, shading their eyes against the afternoon sun. Janet and Ken froze near the pie-eating contest, both of them staring at me with growing horror. "My name is John Mitchell, and I have a story to tell you. It's about trust and betrayal and the price of thinking you're smarter than everyone else." "John, don't do this," Janet called out, but her voice was lost in the crowd noise. 23 years ago, I married a woman I thought I knew. We built a life together, raised 2 beautiful daughters, weathered the usual storms that come with any long marriage. I thought we were happy. I thought we were honest with each other. I pulled out a manila folder thick with printed emails, credit card statements, and photographs. Turns out I was wrong about the honesty part. The crowd was growing, drawn by the drama and the promise of scandal. I spotted Billy near the beer tent, giving me a thumbs up. Beth and Britt stood by the dunking booth, their faces unreadable. See, my wife Janet has been having an affair with Ken Williams from the bank. Nothing unusual there. People fall out of love, marriages end, life goes on. But Janet and Ken decided to make it my problem by spending my money on their romance and lying to my face about it. I held up a hotel receipt. The Riverbend Resort, every Tuesday for 2 months, charged to our joint credit card. Janet told me she was working late. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw Martha, Janet's mother, pushing through the people toward her daughter. Bank employees clustered together, whispering urgently. "But here's where it gets interesting," I continued. "Turns out Ken's been playing both sides. Show them, Michelle." Michelle from accounting stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. In her hand was a thick stack of papers. "Ken's been falsifying expense reports," she announced. "Company dinners that were really dates, business trips that were romantic getaways. He's stolen over $15,000 from the bank." Ken tried to run. He pushed through the crowd toward the parking lot, but Billy and 3 of his gym buddies were waiting. They didn't hurt him, just formed a friendly circle that encouraged him to stay and listen. "The best part," I said into the microphone, "is that Ken's been telling Janet he loves her while he's been seeing at least 2 other women, including someone else from the bank, someone who's been feeding me information for weeks." I looked directly at Janet, who stood frozen in the middle of the crowd like a deer in headlights. "Michelle, would you like to tell everyone why you've been so helpful?" Michelle stepped up to the microphone. "Because Ken promised to leave his wife for me first, before he started promising the same thing to Janet, and because I'm tired of watching him destroy people's lives." The crowd was silent now, hanging on every word. This was better than television, better than any soap opera. This was real drama happening to real people they knew. "So here's what's going to happen," I said. "Janet, you want a divorce? You've got it. But you're not getting the house, and you're not getting custody of our daughters, and you're definitely not getting any of my retirement money. You're getting exactly what you brought to this marriage, which is nothing." I reached under the equipment table and pulled out a cardboard box. Everything you own that isn't tainted by your affair. It's lighter than you'd think. Janet finally found her voice. You can't do this. This is harassment. This is justice. You wanted to humiliate me in private. I'm returning the favor in public. Ken broke free from Billy's circle and ran toward his car, but he stopped when he saw it. Someone, probably Billy's cousin from the junkyard, had decorated the BMW with washable paint. Cheater was written across the windshield in bright red letters. The tires were flat, and a sign on the hood read, Honk if you support marriage. The crowd began to disperse, people drifting away in small groups, already planning how they'd tell this story to friends and neighbors. The Harvest Festival would be remembered for years, but not for pumpkins or apple cider. Janet stood alone in the middle of the square, tears streaming down her face. Her mother approached slowly, and I heard Martha say, Come on, honey, let's go home and figure this out. Beth and Britt walked over to me as I packed up the sound equipment. Dad, Beth said quietly, that was either the most awesome thing I've ever seen or the most terrible. Maybe both, I admitted. What happens now? Britt asked. I looked around the festival grounds, at the families enjoying their weekend, at the normal people living normal lives without the complications of adultery and betrayal. Now we start over. Just the three of us. Ken's BMW limped out of the parking lot, trailing washable paint and dignity. Janet climbed into her mother's car without looking back. The crowd finished dispersing, already spreading the story to anyone who'd missed the show. I folded up the microphone and walked toward my truck, where Billy was waiting with a beer and a grin. Feel better? He asked. Ask me tomorrow. But as we drove away from the festival, past the normal houses with their normal families and their normal problems, I realized something had changed. The weight I'd been carrying for months was gone. The anger, the humiliation, the sense of being played for a fool, all of it had been left behind in that public square. Janet and Ken had lost everything that mattered, their reputations, their jobs, their standing in the community. I'd lost a marriage that was already over anyway. The math finally balanced.